Growth Pains.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this new episode of Growth Pains. Today we'll be talking about topics such as influencing without having the authority, becoming a specialist versus a generalist, communicating effectively, and positioning your business at a busy space such as fintech. I'm really happy to have a fellow Chilean on the show today. My guest is Matías Honorato, Senior Growth Manager or now Growth Lead, recently promoted at Tally Inc. And for those who are not familiar with Tally, it's a fintech company based in San Francisco, which aims to for people to overcome credit card debt, so they are so you can live less stressed and about money and do what they love. Previously, you also worked at Earnest Inc., which is also in the fintech space, focusing on providing refinancing for student loans. So really happy to have you. Thank you for being here today.
No, thank you. Super excited to be here. Hey everyone, and I'm first time doing this with another Chilean, so it's kind of a weird thing to be doing this in English. In this world today, things are not. It seems like it's a little bit everything crazy. So let's do it.
I don't think I ever heard you speak English before. Right? I was just realizing, right? Because we did the whole prep in Spanish, and then it's great. How do people call you in the US? By the way, do they say Honorato or what do you get there?
That's a good one. I get like hundreds of different pronunciations of my name, but the most common one is Matías.
Oh God!
Matías is at this point, like I don't care anymore. Like I enjoy to like write down all of the different variations that someone can pronounce my name. So it's funny.
Oh shit! I would have gone for like you were just gonna go by Matt or something, right? Like here in the Netherlands, like in the US, I used to get Gallegos for my last name, and in the Netherlands, I get Gallegos, right? Like it's just really weird, but and it's for a whole episode of bad pronunciation, but
exactly.
All right, dude, let's get started. True or false, right? This is the way we start warming up the conversation. So let me, I know you're interested in finances in general, so let me hit you with one first. The valuation of some businesses in Silicon Valley makes absolutely no sense. True or false?
I mean, true, 100%.
It's crazy, huh?
Yeah, it's beyond like any reasonable understanding of how a business works to get to those valuations. And as an insider, I kind of like understand that things go out of hand really quickly.
So 2 + 2 is not 4 anymore.
But also that's the magic of Silicon Valley and the US in general, where like you can dream of getting to those levels of valuations to build those amazing companies. So I think it has a negative consequence, but also creates like positive reinforcement on people to believe that they can get there. Yeah, true. That alternate reality can actually push things in that direction if you want to, right? We've seen it with like the Steve Jobs, and we're also seeing it in Donald's account in the last few days. But that's the way it works. So on the other hand, this is the next one. Most people hiring a growth marketer today don't really have a clear idea about what they want. True or false? True. And this is an issue that I see not only in the US, but it's something that I've been experiencing talking with a lot of Latin American startups. So I think it's basically the core of that problem is not really understanding how to hire for a growth marketing or what are the skill set that a growth marketer should have. Is more like companies are not able to articulate what growth means for that particular company. So I think that's the root cause of the issue. When you are not able to really understand how you grow and what growth means for you, then it's really hard to hire for someone that can help you scale that, right?
Yeah, that's a really cool take, because I usually feel like people get on like, they don't really know what it is. They're not, but at the core it's that, right? It's like hiring a salesperson if you don't understand what sales means to you. It's just not going to work out.
Exactly.
Okay, and I would argue that it's even less in the US, right? Like over there, things are a bit more advanced in this thing in startups, right? So I think it's even more so in Europe or in Latin America, right? It's a little bit more.
But
Yeah.
I would only add to that point also that here in the US, obviously, you have like all of these thought leaders that are like pushing these ideas forwards
Oh,
related to
yeah.
growth. So like you feel a little bit more connected with those concepts. But something that I've been starting to realize is that companies tend to think about growth from a like external point of view, and we could go more in depth into this
Yeah.
over the episode. But what I would say is that growth is something that is born from the core of the company. Like it should be part of the DNA of the company. So starting with the founder searching for product market fit to then when you start scaling and raising money. And usually like it feels like growth is this like looking for things outside when actually companies should be looking within their own resources. So instead of thinking, how do we hire a world-class head of growth,
Yeah.
the question should be, how do we develop this person internally to become the head of growth of our company?
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. The other one, third, this kind of related, but here we go. When starting a new role, most growth marketers try to show quick results when they should instead focus on nailing the fundamentals, market research, competitors, understanding customers, that sort of thing. True or false?
True.
Yeah, right.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. I just mean it's hard to resist that temptation, right? Because you also want to prove your worth.
Exactly. So I think, like in essence, most growth marketers they always try to show and prove the value that they can create to the company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that really awesome attitude of like this fresh air of like someone with new ideas, like someone proposing things and changing things. But also I agree 100% that there's needs to be like a process where it's not only about getting those quick wins and kind of like nailing with like a couple of initiatives that you might run, but also it's like doing the process of understanding the foundational components of what growth means for that company.
Agree. Yeah. And last one, but not least, this one's going to hit you in the heart. Let's see. So cryptocurrencies are just another temporary bubble. They won't last. True or false?
Come on, man. False.
I know you like this one. I'm not particularly a crypto enthusiast, not because I don't like the technology. It's just something that I don't know. I just keep thinking like, oh yeah, I'm going to get into this later. And I just never do. But I know you're a big fan. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I think whatever we call these like cryptocurrencies, blockchain, basically this new technology, what is enabling is kind of like getting us some sort of escape route of the current financial system that from what have happened today, what happened in 2028, and what have happened through the history, we have seen that there's no real value or there's no creation of value on the current financial system. In the opposite hand, what's happening with the cryptocurrencies, what happened with blockchain, with Bitcoin, is that the core foundational part of what this system means is the creation of value. So I think in a way, like moving outside of basically crypto for me is like having that chance, having that exit door of the current system, and actually putting my bets into something that I believe creates more equality, creates more opportunities, and actually produce value to society.
Yeah, it's cool. I think a lot of people don't realize that that's I guess the core for a lot of people, right? Like basically your money really being your money, right?
Exactly.
And not depending on the financial system or whatever you put it, right? So that's really interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, before we get into the pains, I always start asking people for something they're really, really bad at. So what is it for you? What are you shamefully bad at? Nobody at Tally is listening to this, so no worries.
That's a good question. I would say like more on like the operational side and kind of like on my day-to-day work, I would say that I'm pretty bad at like Facebook ads and like paid social. It's like for me, it's still like a monster that I'm not able to like really understand how it operates. Not from how to build the campaigns, how to like make the beats, and like how to target the users that you want, but actually like understanding what drives user to, as they scroll through their Instagram feed or Facebook, what drives them to like actually make a click and then make a purchase, right? So that's something that, and this is something that I've seen people at Tally doing incredibly well. And until this day, I for me, it's really hard to understand, like, how does that ad brought someone to then take a line of credit of $6,000 dollars. It's kind of like still like magic for me.
Yeah, and I guess because marketers are hyper aware as well about ads, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So most marketers are like, yeah, I never click on ads. So I like try to be, it's our job, right? But you go like, yeah, no, I would never click on the paid results in the search engine, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, you have that bias, I guess, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's a lot about bias, and there's also like this process of empathizing with your user and like understanding that what might drive you as a marketer doesn't mean that it's gonna drive the conversion for that user, because like you are in completely different points of views, or you have like different experiences in your life. So there's like a lot of processes around how you put yourself on your user's shoes. And then something more in the non-operational side that I consider myself pretty bad at, and I think this is a skill that I really need to start developing, is saying no to things.
Oh man, don't even get me started on that one. Yeah.
It sometimes gets to this point where you're thinking about like why I'm doing all of this. Like I'm like overwhelmed with work and
being a nice idiot.
Exactly. And when you start breaking it down, you realize like, okay, like I committed to this. So it's like that process of like really being able to say no in a respectful way, but knowing that your time is one of the most valuable things that you have.
Yeah, for those who listen to this regularly, I think they know that I can definitely sympathize with that pain. So let's dive into your first pain that we're gonna talk about today, which is influencing without authority. Right? You just got promoted, but there's always somebody above you. There's always other levers that you have to pull. So in every organization, building bridges across departments and trying to have internal influence is key to move ideas forward. Right? You can have a lot of really good ideas, but if you're not managed to get them through, nothing really happens. How much of a challenge has this been for you, whether now or at previous roles? How have you dealt with this?
Yeah, I think that's always like a constant battle between what you feel is the right thing to do and what you're seeing are the outcomes of the actions that the company is taking. Mm-hmm. And I've come to learn and understand that there's this middle ground between what you feel is right and what the company actually needs at that point, right? So, and I think it's a process of really understanding that there's a lot of unknowns out there and things that you don't know. So being able to, when you're approaching like a new initiative, or if you want to push forward a new project or you have a new idea, understanding that whoever is in front of you knows things that you don't know is a really important step towards like empathizing with that person and making sure that you are putting yourself on their shoes in order to understand what are their motivations, what success means for them, and kind of like making that connection outside of the actual things that you want to push forward.
Yeah, and something I hear really commonly, it's marketers complaining about how their CEOs, CFOs, or whatever don't get marketing, right? There's so much post out this like, hey, I never work for somebody who doesn't get marketing, and all this kind of stuff. In my experience, there are two paths to prove the worth of marketing efforts. Like one of them is very rational, and it's like we were talking about before, like you get results that nobody can deny are fantastic, and then everybody's like, okay, I'm just gonna shut up and listen to this kid because he knows exactly what he's doing, right? But that's way easier said than done, first and foremost, right? Because everybody's like, hey, I'm gonna come in and kill it. Yeah, sure, but it's not that simple, or we would all be doing amazing. And the other one is that the more human, emotional path to that, right? Where despite of the results, you become a person that inspires others across the organization and a team motivator and a positive influence, right? I personally believe that the emotional route can be even more powerful in many situations than the rational one, because in general, I believe that great marketing needs to convince the heart before it can convince the brain, right? It really needs to like touch in the heart before it touches in the brain. So, and I think that's true internally as well. Has this been your experience? Do you feel like you get more leverage when you like really kill it with an experiment, or when you actually become a person that people feel inspired by?
Yeah, I think my process has started and my process at Tally has been a lot of learnings about that. What you were saying, start with like more. I've always, and I think it's something that we Latin Americans have, which is like being much more passionate, being much more like talking loudly, like really excited about your ideas, like pushing them forward, like making like shit happens. So one of the things that I've learned through my experience at Tally and especially in the US is like about put all of that hard, but also be able to frame it in a way that the other person, if you're talking with your CEO, if you're talking with your CFO, frame it in a way that it makes sense to them. So, for example, if you're talking with your CFO, like, you know that what they care about is like how the company is going to do financially next year. So how are those initiatives are going to help them be more successful at running the financial plan for the company or hitting the financial targets that they have. So in a way, starting with the heart makes things a lot more easier because you can really motivate and engage with people, but then putting the kind of like that passion in a box and deliver it for the CFO in this case around numbers, results, what's going to be like the financial impact that is going to have in the company. It makes it more powerful because it can resonate with the other person.
Yeah. And also I think like social capital is super important, and people, one of the advantages of being the nice idiot, right? Like the guy that just helps everyone, is that you do accumulate a lot of this social capital, right? Like people, when people feel like you've helped them when they've needed you and you want to like get, that favor back, having some social cash at hand becomes really important, right? Have you felt 100%. At some point that nice idiot thing that you were like, holy shit, why am I spending 4 hours working on this sheet, then paid off 4 months later when you actually wanted to get the product team to work on something?
100%. I call them like karma points.
Yeah.
So like you're constantly building these karma points across organization.
Yeah.
And you're in a way like one favor that you might do today might like get paid in like 2, 3, 4, 6, whatever is the timeline. The key thing I feel is that you should be able to do those things without thinking that you're gonna get something back at some point.
Of course.
But I don't personally, and this is something that I do on my everyday life when I go and I network with people, and obviously I always try to add value, but there has to be some strategic thinking behind of with whom are you like making those relationships, with whom are you investing your time, and building basically those positive karma points. Even if they might not get paid in the future, at least you're building that from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, and I think like this is kind of like talking money with your employer, right? Like it's something that nobody wants to acknowledge, that when you build relationships, there is a little bit of a selfish intent there as well. Like eventually you say, hey, I want to have a solid network if anything happens to me in the future and whatnot. Like our own relationship is a bit built on that, right? Like we met each other through marketing, and we're like, oh, you never know when Matías can help me, and you never when. So in a way, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you don't do it with that in mind all the time, right? You're not like, oh, I'm going to help this guy because I need something back. But there's of course an element of that in the equation, right? That's super clear. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people when it comes to influencing, it's that they try to skip the line, right? Like this kind of stuff you were just saying about our Latinality. I guess I just made up a word for you. Listen to the podcast, but yeah, sure, we get intense and we're like, hey, you want to push this forward, but there's no skipping the line on this one, right? Like when you just join an organization in particular, or when you're new in every sort of surrounding, you need to get in the queue and do things one thing at a time, right? So the question is, have you made that mistake in your career of like coming in guns blazing, being I'm so freaking cool that you guys should listen to me, and then you just hit the wall shortly after? Has that happened to you?
Yeah, I have one episode where that happened. It was working at Ernest, and it was my first time working in like these high growth startups in San Francisco. I felt like basically like I was I was like hot shit, like coming from Chile to like play in the major leagues, like basically like playing. It felt like playing for the Real Madrid or Barcelona, like making that jump. So I was like all excited about it. I wanted to push all of my ideas forward, and one of the first things that I started to focus on was on working on basically optimizing our website for SEO, making sure that we were doing like a good job on the content side of things, that we were like that overall website was technically sound. And I started to realize that there was like some things happening on the content side, and we have someone that she was running all of the content team.
I can see where this is going. Oh God. Okay.
I came in, I jumped into like all of these blog posts, like I changed like most of the URLs, like I added keywords, I added like H1 titles, and like I remember her coming back to me saying like, what the fuck? Like, what did you do? Like, you little kid, like, what are you doing with my work? And I had a conversation with my manager as well.
Yeah.
It was with a lot of respect, right? Like, it wasn't like they were like really angry about me, but they kind of like said like, hey, like there's processes, there's like a way to do things. And always be careful of like, if you're pushing something forward, that who are you gonna be kind of like tapping on their toes, or like how like are you, like is how people are gonna feel for when you do that work. So I think that's one of the important lessons that I got from that experience.
That is super common, right? Like how many guys that join a company have been in a room and being like, yeah, but this part of our product is shit, or like, and if you don't stop for a second and think that some person in the room might have spent 7 months of their life on that part that you're calling shit in front of their faces, it's like, dude, exactly. It can really backfire, right? And it's very easy. Like when you analyze a business from the outside, it's so easy to say, oh man, what a shit idea they had. But when you're like driving, steering the wheel, like it's not that obvious, right? Otherwise, everybody's a general after the battle, right? It's like, exactly. It's super easy. But the other thing is that, you know, people, you were mentioning this before, but I want to go a bit deeper. Like people tend to think that influencing the work in a company is more about talking and less about listening, right? But it is pretty much the other way around, as you were saying. Like if people don't feel like you're listening to their ideas, they basically won't give a shit about yours, right? That's to begin with. And active listening is something that I personally really struggle with. Because my mind is always rushing like 1,000%, and I just feel like if I don't say what I have in my mind right now, I'm just gonna lose my train of thought and I'm gonna let this fantastic idea go, which was probably shit to begin with, right? But I felt like it was amazing. And one thing that I found works for me, it's that taking notes. So when somebody's speaking, I just tend to take notes, and then after they stop speaking, I go, well, is this even worth saying anymore? Often not really, right? It was just shit to begin with. And I also found that it's really important, maybe in this day and age, to also do it in a notepad or not a laptop, because then people just feel like you're chatting in Slack, right? Are you a good listener, or this is something that you struggle with? Like people that are listening can see that I've already interrupted you like 20 times, so I'm clearly not good at this. What about you?
I think that's like it might be that we need to do a study of like Chilean people. It might be
right.
There's like a commonality there, because like I struggle with that every single day.
Oh man, this is great. I can now use this to tell people here that it's not just me.
Yeah, exactly. Like feel free to share this across your company. Like active listening is like, it's really hard, especially nowadays when we are working remote. We have Zoom open in another screen. We have Slack. We have WhatsApp. We have the email. We have in my case, crypto. It's like there's so many things happening at the same time that it's really hard to make the conscious decision of like, okay, I'm gonna stop doing everything that I'm doing right now, and I'm actually gonna listen to what they have to say.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned, and something that have helped me, because I know that my brain is always rushing with new ideas, and like when someone is talking, I'm already started to think like 10 step away, like, okay, what I'm gonna say when they stop talking.
Yeah.
So something that I tend to see that works for me is like I put the conversations in recording, and I try to keep a little bit more quiet in the meeting, so I can then process what they said. Like I can make notes, and then on the recordings I can go back and say like, okay, this is like a section where I felt I could have added something, and there's no issue in following up after, right? I think doing that exercise of following up is really, really powerful and can make a lot of changes to the way that you are not only. I'm talking about effective communication.
Yeah.
Doing that process of like taking a step back, really process what you want to say, structure in a way that makes sense, and then go and share it in another channel.
But that's a really good point, because the main argument to interrupt is just that you think that you have this fantastic idea, right? Which, but if you actually do it later, you're going to realize that that follow-up will probably be much shorter, and the person felt heard at the moment, and they will feel heard afterwards as well, because you're sending your notes clearly showing that you were listening to what they were saying, right? So about this thing that you said, this Mike. So that's a really good one. The other part is that, and I want to make a segue to our next pain, right? One effective way of having more influence in a business, it's becoming an expert in an area, right? If you're the person to go to about SEO, then you will have very strong leverage and influence in that area. Everybody will come to you from the CEO down. And one of the pains you want to talk about is whether become a specialist or a generalist, which I found it really, really interesting. So some people have a clear plan for their skill and learning, right? I'm going to do this course then I'm going to do this one. You have your playlist in all of your different platforms and so on. Are you one of those people, or are you a complete mess?
I'm a complete mess. I actually admire the people that can pick like some sort of vocation, or like once, like if we think about talking about like growth marketing, this T-shaped like learning process, or like the skills that you need to develop. There's people that go really in depth into one specific skill. Like I really admire that, because like as you were saying, like it makes you put yourself as an expert in the organization for that specific thing. My work have led me to basically be like a jack of all trades. So I've been kind of like from data to lifecycle marketing to organic growth to product-led growth. And it's kind of hard when you need to kind of present one of these things as an expert, because everyone knows that you are doing multiple things.
Yeah.
But also gives you what I do like about being a generalist is that it gives you that broad perspective of how things are working overall. You have like a good understanding of how you have a good understanding of how the business overall is operating. So you can have, it feels like I take the best decisions when I have like the bigger context possible. So if I understand what the CEO is thinking, and then how that translates into our mission as a company, and how then translate into the life cycle strategy that we need to implement, then I feel that I'm doing, basically I'm excelling at my work. If I go really in depth into one thing, I start to be like this tunnel vision where like it's hard for me to start like getting ideas and feedback from outside to really inform what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have a bit of a prejudice with generalists, right? Like they basically like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, right? But if you want to be a manager, particularly, or like leading a multi-disciplinary disciplinary team. Oh my god, my
Disciplinary.
English. Disciplinary. Okay, that kind of stuff. Like, it's often the case in marketing that you just have to be a jack of all trades, right? Like, instead of becoming really, really good at one thing, you get to become good at a subset of things, and otherwise it will be very hard for you, right? So a bit more width and a bit less depth, right? What I think it's doable though is to like maybe reach out to try to be really, really good. You just mentioned the T-shaped model or whatever. I think all of these things are just jargon, but you can aim to become like in the upper 80% of people, right? Of like two of those things, right? And then like decent at all the rest. Right, with all of your interests from crypto, from here to there, from SEO, like have you kind of like been able to nail down what those 2 or 3? Sure, you don't want to be a CRO expert in that only, but there must be a couple of things in the arsenal that you say like these 2 I could excel at.
Yeah, that's a good question, and kind of like before I answer like specific things that I do that I feel that I've been learning a lot, and what drives me and one of the things that I'm really passionate about. I cannot remember who wrote this article, but basically what they were saying is that getting to be in the 1%, so to be like an expert, like someone that basically like is the master of like Facebook ads or master of social ads, like to be in that 1% is really, really, really hard. But moving from like in multiple different disciplines, like what you were saying, like lifecycle marketing, CRO, SEO, etc., move from like the bottom 80 to the top 20 or the top 15 is much more achievable. So, and when you are in the, let's call it like in the top 10 percentile of different initiatives, I feel it gives you a better breadth of understanding than working your way to the top on one. But this is my personal opinion and the way that I've experienced my personal growth across my career. And to answer your question, I would say this perspective of like starting first with like the company mission, the vision, what we want to achieve, have helped me to decide to go in this path of like how we build systems and frameworks that can help us grow organically. So what I mean with organic growth is not only like doing SEO or conversion rate optimization. It's like really thinking from a way that how do we develop a product and how we create the internal processes in a product that can help us scale growth. And basically, organic is a representation of how much your users are really in love with your product, how are they talking about their product, and you can engineer all of that. So that's the cool thing when you have a product that, like Tally, where basically talking about your finances, talking about like having credit card debt is not a really common thing. There's a lot of taboos on that. You can still engineer your product so people feel compelled to talk about it with their friends and their families. And I think that process is one of the areas that I felt more interested on the last couple of months.
I think this is like the answer is right there, right? Because like in a way you're not cut out to be like a specialist of only one thing, because even the thing that you want to specialize is a combination of multiple things, right? Like to get that job done, you're going to have to be really good at CRO, you're going to have to be really good at the product, you're going to have to be really good at SEO and a bunch of things, right? So I think when you think in that way, that's also a sign to be like, hey, dude, you are not the SEO 1%er, right? You are not the CRO. You're not for that, right? There's other dudes that will know every little tweak to do in the algorithm, every little thing. But when you think more holistically, you're bound to become a bit more of a generalist, right?
Yeah,
that's super interesting. Okay.
And just to add there, and for the listeners, like there is nothing wrong on going the path of like I want to be a specialist versus I want to be an generalist. I just feel that you should go the route that makes you more passionate about the work that you do every day. At the end of the day, we work from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
but like we usually work more than that. So basically try to push yourself to do things that you actually are excited about, waking up in the morning, going into that, and how you can keep learning and iterating over.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong on this one, right? But like both have risks, right? Like when you are a true specialist on something, there's also a benefit that comes with that, is that if you're the world-renowned copywriter, then you're never going to be out of work. Like everybody's going to want to work with
Exactly.
you. You're always going to have the biggest brands reaching out to you, because sure, they have other people doing copywriting, but you're that guy, right?
Yeah.
And getting there, as you say, is really, really hard. On the other side, it's very risky as well, right? Because you're putting all of your time, all of your effort in a single discipline. In the world that we live in right now, right? Let's say you are, a Google Ads specialist, and all of a sudden, Armen Sundar decides to say, you know what, I have a new algorithm that optimizes itself with AI or whatever the hell people can come up with. So you don't need a person to manage your accounts anymore. This thing is like flawlessly automated. Like gone, right?
Exactly.
You're out of the picture on
Exactly.
that. Do you think being a generalist is a bit safer in terms of future-proofing? How do you try to make sure that you're future-proofing your career in that respect, in the skills you choose to acquire? Or is that not even something you've thought of?
No, I think that's something that I actually think a lot. I think a lot about, and especially with the example that you were saying, right? We know that automation is coming. We like in the marketing field, we see this every day with all of the things that are happening on Facebook with their algorithm, what happens with Google, and basically what they're pushing forward is to remove the need for companies to have someone actively managing those campaigns.
Yeah.
And because that way they can basically democratize and they can get more revenue out of it, because they have more companies that can basically advertise through these platforms. So the way that I try to approach this is I try to be like on top of what's going on in the world for the things that I care about. For example, on SEO, on organic growth, on product growth. What are the latest trends? What is happening on privacy and security? What's happening on user behavior models? What people are talking about in terms of like even like latest tactics and things that you can like start testing. But that, like when you get into that rhythm of like understanding that there's people like experts on each of these areas, which is awesome because they're sharing like really in-depth knowledge about what they do, and you can be following them across like social media or through their, like now everyone has a newsletter or a podcast.
Yeah, tell me about it. Any idiot can do a podcast now.
Man, I'm like super proud of you. Like, this is amazing. So knowing that you can follow like you through your podcast and learn more about specific things, that way you can start like directionally changing where you need to like spend more time learning and like developing new skills. So to give like a really, really like clear example, Tally is a mobile first company. Basically, we have developed all of our product through this both an Android and an iOS app. And early next year, we don't know when, Apple is gonna remove IDFA from being like the universal tracking system that we have used to basically measure and attribute our the performance of our marketing spend. And this is something that was announced like, let's say 6 months ago. And since then, like I've started to realize that, oh damn, like the world is going to look really different for us in like 6 months. What are the things that I need to start understanding now that it's going to help me better position myself, but also the company and the work that I do for Tally in a way that we can kind of like ride this new wave. So I've started to learn much more about incrementality frameworks. I've started to read more about multi-touch attributions. I've started to really understand how basically the pipelines of our data systems are connected. So how we can prepare ourselves for this. So in a way, like just like hearing what's going on in the world, like it helps you shape the direction where you or at least for me, where I need to keep developing my personal growth and my career.
But that's super interesting because in a way as well, like at startups, you don't often, you like to think you pick, but often you don't get to pick, right? Like this, sometimes the turn of events just pushes you in one direction and you have to become really good at something just because you need to, right? In general, in startups, having a broader skill set, it's very appreciated. Like, for example, I studied audio engineering in college, right? And now I have a goddamn podcast. Or where I edit a lot of audio in the early days when we were said, okay, let's just not spend money on a freelancer. Like, I'll just do it myself, or video or whatnot, right? Are you also comfortable with crossing those boundaries and say, like you just said, right, you're going to remove this, then I'll step up and I'll become that person? Or are you a little bit more like, you know what, I'm actually on my path of becoming an SEO expert, so I would like to stick to that. Can we just outsource this to another guy in Upwork or something? Or you're the guy to jump on it?
I would say that I'm a little bit of the guy that jump into the problem and goes like face to face to it, and many times I get hurt like badly. And I think it's I probably will relate to this, and goes back to that early question about or the comment about saying no to things.
Say no.
So it's super. It's super hard to me to say no, and especially when I see this new challenge that we are going to have to face. Like I tend to be like, okay, like I'll keep. Like I'll do the work. Like I'll push things forward. So I'll rally like the teams and making sure that this is like an important topic for the company, educate the company. But what I've started to realize is that I don't have to do that by myself. Like I don't have to be alone on that journey. So even though that I might see the problem clearly, I know that at the company at Tally, there's people that are much better than me on framing those problems. And what I try to do now is like bringing them on board early on that journey, so we can clearly state what's the problem that we're solving for, what are the learnings that we need to get, and where we want to go in the next X amount of time. So
or even outside the company, right? Like that's also something like you're like, hey, we need to figure this out. It's going to take us 4 months. Yeah, let's bring somebody who figured it out already, right? Let's skip that part. I think that's also super important. So in all honesty, to start wrapping up with this topic, I personally feel that there is like no right or wrong here. It's not a binary thing either. Like people tend to think like either you're a generalist or a specialist, and there's all sorts of shades in between. I honestly think that for me, it comes down to like, if you want to be a strategic leader and kind of like have influence in a lot of areas of the business, you're going to end up being a generalist, you want it or not. Right? You need to be one of those people that say like, I am extremely passionate about this particular thing only, and I'm okay with the other things of the business just going in directions with other people. And in startups, you'll mostly see a little bit of the first type, I guess. But the third pain you wanted to discuss was communication. You kind of jumped in it before, but we kind of like jump in it a little bit, but we can discuss it a bit more deeply. So communicating effectively, right? Communication is key. I think now that in these remote days, this is like even more evident. So many long emails go unread, and Slack messages that you thought everybody was going to dig into, like nobody reads. What are your main challenges? And not because just of COVID, but in general, when it comes to communication in your organization, what is the things that really you struggle with on this area?
Yeah, I think as a starter, it's just that English is my second language.
It's all right. Come on.
No, I know, but this is more of like a personal thing. I feel that I'm super like conscious about it, which plays a good role to be conscious about English not being my first language. So I know that there's some limitations, and it gives me the frameworks to think about when to make pauses, when and now actually like follow up with people to make sure that they understood what I was trying to say. But in the other hand, also it has some negative consequence to be so conscious about it that like it prevents me from maybe like be a little bit more of myself in meetings, or like speak more like freely on the company, etc. Like, so I feel that's kind of like one of the first things that comes to my mind when I'm talking about effective communication is like, okay, like I understand that English is my second language, so I need to do an extra effort in how I communicate my ideas, how I framework my ideas, and how I structure what I want to say. And that means that I need to prepare a little bit more, and it's fine. Like when you realize that it's basically like going to, like, it's basically like playing like a football match. Like you want to train over the week to play on the weekend, right? So it's the same for me. Like if I have a big presentation, I know for me to be able to communicate effectively, I need to take the time to prepare for it, like practice it. Like so it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, and there's also an extra layer to that because it's also not my native language, right? But I find the cultural layer is also even more complex, right? Because also we have very different ways of communicating in terms of what you can say, what you cannot say. I am very famous for saying very inappropriate things, so I have to really watch my mouth when it comes. I have a really inappropriate, not lawyer-friendly sense of humor. So I need to, when we do this as well, like try to like be like, okay, that joke is actually, it's gonna get me canceled, right? Like especially now that these memes of like how hard it is to not offend people in 2020, right? So that's an extra layer of that. Besides that, like something I find difficult in communications nowadays is finding that sweet spot between too short and too long. I get these emails now that are like 4 words in it, short, let's do that. Kind of like there's no, on a way, I'm happy there's not necessary anymore to say, hey, hope you're doing well in these trying times, bullshit. Like I appreciate a straight to the point email. But on the other hand, I hope that you tell me enough so I don't have to get back to you 7 times until I figure out what the hell you wanted, right?
Yeah.
How do you have this balance? Do you think you mastered this like long versus short balance, or are you the guy that still struggling with that?
No, I'm definitely like struggling with that, and I think it goes back a little bit to what you were saying on like culture, and like we come from a different culture. Where in Latin America, you go like 8 rounds, like you do like all of these circles, and like you try to be super nice to try to say like one thing that could have said in like 1 sentence. Yeah, and it has been like kind of like a culture shock, or it was when I first came to the US, that like you don't have to do all of that. Like you can go straight to the point, and it's not offensive. It's what people want to hear. Like they appreciate their time. So I think I'm still like in this process of like being able to tell a story, because I feel that in communication, being able to create this story, being a storyteller is really important. Where you can put all of these context around what you want to say, but starting with what you want whoever is in front of you to get out of that conversation. So start with what you want, like that effective communication. So say what you want to say, and then kind of like bring the context of why you wanted to say that. So those are kind of like the work that I'm constantly doing. So it's I think there's like obviously like some cultural things going on, but as anything in the world, like you can practice it, and like if you're conscious about it, I think you can always do a better work, a better job. Yeah,
the other part is frequency, right? Because one thing is how large those communications are, whether you put a huge message or whatnot, but frequency is super important, and very often not, now with the Slacks and all these like quick chat tools that we have at work, it's so easy to just annoy people, right? And communication is tricky because when you are communicating too frequently, it's extremely distracting, right? A lot of us have like next to us WhatsApp, Telegram, Slack, email, and all this stuff going around. So I think a key part is understanding what you don't need to communicate. Like I usually try to think about this for anybody in my team listening. Don't say it's bullshit. I really do try. But it's like if I got charged 50 cents for every Slack message, right? Would I just send the one I was thinking about sending? Yeah. That one that just says like, hey, how's it going? Like there's like nothing in it, right? There's like nothing interesting to say. There's not going to bring anything to the team, like nothing like that. Because there are so many things going on. So one rule of thumb for me, it's that if what I'm about to send, which will distract them, like regardless of whatever setup they have, it will distract them. Is it more important than the thing that they're working on right now, or can it wait, right? And if it can wait, why don't I just wait until the end of the day and send all my thoughts in one go? Or even better, I wait for the next team meeting and I just tell them then, right?
Exactly.
But the thing is that this depends on the person as well, right? So you can have some person that do this very well and some people that just keep nagging you, and what they could say in one message, they say in 25. Have you guys been able to like work through this as an organization, you think, or is it still like something that gets out of control sometimes?
I think for us at Tally, the challenge is like a little bit of the opposite. Like we need to improve the way that we communicate, and we need to improve like that frequency, as you were saying. It feels like many times we are really careful about not interrupting the work of other people, or because we have so much work, we forget about doing regular updates of what we're doing. And especially nowadays with remote work, it feels like being on top of things and really being sharing what you're doing with the rest of the organization is really, really important. So they can actually understand not only what are you doing on your day-to-day life, but also what are the initiatives that we are pushing forward, how that is helping the company achieve the goals that we have. So I would say like at Tally, it's a little bit of the opposite in that sense.
A little bit under-communicating.
It's under-communication.
Yeah.
For sure. And so we have had like specific things that we are doing to improve that. So for example, from the growth and the marketing team, what we're doing is that we set up like a specific Slack channel where we are going to be making updates like every Monday. So once a week, we make an update of like, hey, this is what are the things that we are working on. These are the learnings that we had from last month or the last few weeks. And this is some of the like results that are helping us get to the like hit the OKRs that we have.
I've been down that path, and what's tricky is that this line where that balance is found is like so goddamn thin, right? There's not a lot of headroom there, so you can easily go from under communicating to over communicating. So what ends up happening is that people say, "Oh, that's great that the growth team did that. Let's do that too." And all of a sudden, every Monday there's like 25 updates. And you're like, dude, I would have to spend my entire morning reading all this shit, right? Yeah. So that's super tricky. I think, it's difficult.
I agree 100%. But what I tend to say to new employees at Tally or new team members is start by over communicating. Like, don't hold your thoughts, or if you want to share an update or if you want to share something, like start by over communicating, and then it's easier to regulate to basically get to like a frequency that makes sense to everyone. But if you start in the other part where it's like not communicating, I feel that's a skill that is much more harder to develop rather than scaling down over communicating. So
and in a way I feel like making it an organizational priority is super important as well, right? Like everybody's focused on growing the business, of course, and this and the other. But if you're not taking care of your comms, eventually it really backfires, right? So really setting rules and make sure that people commit to them, because as I said at the beginning, right, like everybody's different. Like a lot of people will be like, I don't want to talk to anybody, leave me alone. And people will be like, oh, if I'm using headphones, please don't interrupt me. And then you have to learn the quirks of every fucking guy in the office, because you're like, oh, this guy with headphones, I cannot talk to him. This other guy loves that I interrupt him. So you need to find a way to like standardize that for the business and really enforce it, right? And have and name a champion of it, whoever it is, right? And be like, dude, you need to really enforce it. So when somebody sends something too often, you need to be like, hey guys, like remember these guidelines and so on. It's just really tricky. It's a very difficult thing to manage.
I've had a couple of experience with that as well, especially like when you are over communicating and sometimes you want things to happen faster. You might skip what we were talking. You might skip lines, and it might be that, for example, instead of going the route of talking with the PM to get these prioritized in the backlog and create the ticket, I might just go like the line of like, I'm going to talk with the engineer because this is like a super easy change. And like as we grew as an organization and more processes were put in place, those conversations started to be much more difficult and regulated, which is a good thing, but also it creates more bureaucracy. So things get a little bit more slow. But at the end of the day, when you want to build like a sustainable organization that can push things forward and make things happen,
scale.
You really need to have, you need to remove some of that chaos. Chaos?
Yeah, chaos. Yeah, we're having a bad English day. Sorry, everybody. Chaos.
And bring it down to, okay, what are like effective ways to communicate with these people, and also effective ways for you to get the things that you want to make it happen.
Yeah, I want to just to wrap up this topic, a few things that I think work. One of them is having a morning huddle with the team, 15 to 20 minutes, and make sure that everybody understands that is the space where you need to bring the most important blocking things. That is not that the meeting is over and then you start slacking everybody. No, it's there. Yeah. It's that at that time. So after you hang up on that call, then everybody can truly focus. I think that's super important. If nobody mentioned anything there, then you're lost onto the next one, because otherwise you're going to be interrupting everybody. That's important. And the other one, it's that one thing that I found that is a little bit of a hack, it's that I like to communicate more than in Slack in project management tools like Asana. I'm a big fan of Asana, free advertising. You can sponsor me later. But in that one, I mean by when it's a task-related system, right? Like you are forced to only talk about things that are relevant to a particular task. So you are forced to avoid the random chatty things, because whenever you say something, you need to put it in a task. There's no general chat. There's no like, hey, I just wanted to say something to you, right? You need to say about this X, Y, or Z, right? So I think making that your main channel over Slack, it's good, because then people understand that, okay, this is the channel I cannot miss anything on. If I didn't read something in Slack, it's fine. Probably it's not blocking anybody. I can read later. But if I miss something here, these are the stuff where people are going to be like, dude, I really need you to tell me this before I keep going, right? So that's one other trick that I found. And the other one is, to try to keep it as succinct as possible. If you guys have heard my questions, you definitely know that I'm not good at that. But I think in a way, keeping it very succinct, and also like highlighting like a too long didn't read section where you say like, if you're too lazy to read this entire thing, these are the 3 things everybody should get from this, so you guys know. I think it's also a bit of a good practice. Anything you want to add in there that you were thinking before we go to the next
topic? I agree 100% with what you said. And the only thing that I would add is if you're thinking about sending a Slack message or sending an update to the organization or to your team or to a specific team member, like, and this is going back to some of the topics that we have talked about before, but it's like, put yourself on their shoes and like really think, is this what I'm going to write? Like, if I would be on their position,
exactly,
would they care about it? Like, are they going to find any valuable information that is going to make them more successful at what they do?
Yeah.
And if your answer is no, then you can skip that and maybe like mentioning it in another forum.
Exactly.
But especially with like chat communication, like being thoughtful about what is the impact that you're generating in the work of the other person is really, really important.
Yeah. And we're coming on to the last pain of the day, which is positioning, right? Like positioning your business, particularly in a busy space, because fintech is booming like crazy. And you guys are one more player in that whole space. So in Europe, companies like Adyen, Klarna, Revolut, and the US, you have Brex, Robinhood, NerdWallet, of Tally, and many more. In a busy space, good positioning becomes super, super important. How much of a challenge has this been for you guys?
For us, it has been quite a bit of a challenge. As you mentioned, the fintech space is booming all around the world. There's new companies being launched and created like almost every day. Mm-hmm. And one of the focus where we have spent a lot of time thinking this term, and I would say the last 6 months, is developing our brand. To be completely honest, I didn't know anything about branding and like positioning and like.
It's normal, right? Because when you have a product like you guys, you tend to be like, I'm going to win by an amazing product only.
Exactly.
Right.
And you start to realize how much of important it is to build trust and that confidence with your users even before they experience your product. You might know that your product is amazing, but that doesn't mean that the someone that just saw your website is going to think that, oh yeah, like I'm going to trust this brand to manage all of my credit cards.
Yep.
I have to add my financial information, and then they're going to give me like 10K in a line of credit. It's like the level of commitment is something that you have to keep in mind. And when you're developing your brand guidelines, when you're developing your brand voice, you need to keep consider all of those things to build that that relationship even before they experience the product. So at Tally, the last 6 months, we hired a CMO. She has a lot of experience working on brand, and she has done an amazing job on kind of like putting those frameworks and putting the mindset of the brand first, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think to your point as well, like in the connection with branding, I think what a lot of people get confused with positioning is its relationship with value proposition, right? A lot of people think that they're exactly the same thing, but the main difference there, in my view, is that positioning is completely related with those around you, right? So it's how you sit in this environment when there's so many things around you that you need to have a position there. So it's not exactly the problem you solve, like, in this case, reducing your credit card debt, but it is actually, why should I get it on top of my banking app, on top of all of the other things that I have on my phone? Because right now the average person has a lot of that. Is this what's the biggest issue for you right now? Is it to internally define this, so to see we as Tally want to sit here in this scape, or you have that very much figured out, but the issue is to put that in the mind of the consumer?
No, for us is really making sure that people understand what they are signing up for. The way that Tally works is that we offer this revolving line of credit that users use, or we use to pay off the credit card debt of our clients and users. And that's a concept that is super novel and doesn't exist here in the US. Usually you either take a personal loan or you go through the route of like getting like a 0% APR credit card that you use to basically pay off your other credit card. So like you getting more debt. The way that we approach it is that we offer you this line of credit, and because we offer you a lower interest rate, we save you money every month on your credit card debt. But that's something that it's really hard for them to understand because it's new. So for us, it's about finding the way of really being able to express through our value prop and through what we do as a product, how Tally works. I think that's like the foundational concept of everything that we are pushing forward, is how Tally can make you successful to kind of achieve your financial goals, but also how Tally works and operates in a more like foundational level with your finance to get to that goal that you have to get, which right now is to be out of credit card debt.
Right. And that's also like a classic, I guess, sign of positioning issues, right? When your current customers love you, but it's really hard to explain to new prospects why they are going to love you. Exactly. Very related to the value prop, of course. But the other thing is that I was just referring before is that the average person nowadays has a lot of apps, right, to manage their money. A lot of people have an account in a regular normal bank and then 3 accounts in like different digital banks because they offer a particular product that's different, or they work without commission in the country that I go to, whatever it is. From a marketing and business perspective, like many of us think that you cannot really be a great sofa and a great bed at the same time. Right, it's kind of a marketing rule. You are really amazing at one thing, and then you try to not branch out, right? But there are a lot of players in your sector that have branched out, right? They say, "Hey, I'm the whole fintech solution. I solve all of your issues." What, in your view, not even in Tally's view, like in your view, what is the path to take there? Is it depth over width or width over depth? Do you go deeper or do you expand and solve every problem at the time?
Yeah, I that's a really good question, and it's something that actually we have tried to do, to expand across markets, and it has basically backfire at us, just because to be successful at running a company and to be successful at growing on a space like fintech, you have to be like a ruthless prioritization. You have to have ruthless prioritization
to pick your battles.
Really, yeah, exactly. Like really understand where are you putting your eggs. Really understand why are you making those bets, and how that's going to help you scale to be a more successful company, and that you can offer a better product and a better experience to your users, right? I feel that the way that these fintechs have developed is about winning one market and then expanding to other markets. I feel that credit card debt is a $1 trillion.
Yeah, I know, it's insane in the US. Yeah,
it's insane. So like we are not afraid of competition. Like I feel that like having competition actually make us look at what other players are doing and be better at deciding what we need to do. And also it's such a big market that I don't think there's like a winner takes all. Like there's going to be companies that are going to be integrated into different verticals, and we will see what happens in the future. Hopefully we have more regulation that doesn't allow like these FANG companies to acquire every single company out there and every sector and build these like monstrous type of businesses where they have control over all of your social media, financial life, like things that you buy, etc., etc. But so the way that we approach at Tally is like going really in depth into one solution. So we have worked 5 years on making the first fully automated credit card debt manager. We have achieved that. We have a product that has 99% retention rate month-over-month. We need to start building now the trust on the user so we can get better conversion rates. We can improve on the top of funnel. And then the question for us right now is that, because how Tally works is that people have to go through some credit qualifications in order to access this line of credit. So right on the top of funnel, we are basically rejecting 80% of our users. So the way that we tell ourselves this story is that we have an experience that is broken for 80% of the people that are interacting with Tally. So the challenge that we are pushing forward right now is how, with that same mission and how we like the way that philosophy that we have developed through our current product, how we can expand that so we can create a better experience to these 80% of the users that they might not qualify for the line of credit now, but that doesn't mean that they might not be able to do it on the future, or that we cannot help them get in a better shape on their financial life. So we are pushing for new products that are going to allow us to kind of like cover that user experience, and that's what we care about.
Yeah, when it comes to positioning, we're talking about fintech mostly, right? But you also need to acknowledge that it's a financial industry, is a very traditional industry. So you don't only need to position yourself next to other fintech solutions. You actually need to position yourself with the good old traditional solution as well, right? Like, where do you stand on your comparison versus my traditional bank in Oklahoma that I've used my entire life? Like, where do you stand there? Right. So I think, is that also a challenge, or have you guys go into the decision of being like, people that use traditional services are just not our crowd and we just want to focus on fintech using individuals, or you also try to get some space in the newcomers from the traditional side?
No, I think we totally are focusing on getting these newcomers from the traditional banking. I feel that overall, especially here in the US, like the banking system has kind of like let people down in a lot of different ways, with all of these shady practices, with like the amount of power that they have across the industry. Basically, what they have done with the market overall. So we are getting to this point where people are like actually understanding this. Like, hey, like these companies are like they're not doing any good to us. So they're like looking for new players that offer a different alternative to specific pain points that they have as well. So banks usually are like basically this Swiss Army knife, where they do a lot of things, but they don't do any like in a really good way.
Yeah.
With these fintech players, they can find like specific solution to specific problems.
All right.
So we are kind of like, we are from a position standpoint, we are trying to like kind of like battle that thought or that thinking on bankings as the like owners of all of your financial
the only
life.
solution. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Last one on this topic, and then we go to the resources to wrap it up. So people say, hey, figure out the 2 or 3 things that you do better than anybody else. And it seems very straightforward, but in reality, it's not that straightforward. Sometimes it's really difficult. Do you feel like everybody at Tally, if I grab them tomorrow on the street and be like, hey, why Tally? 2 or 3 things, they all know exactly what to say? Or is this something that you guys are still debating about?
Well, I think we are like an hour in this conversation. So I probably, if ever...
It's a topic for another episode. Yeah.
No, and also like if anyone at Tally was listening to this, probably they dropped off already. So I can say it. Yeah, I think if you ask at Tally, what does Tally do and why are we different? You're gonna, for every single person that you ask at the company, you're gonna get different answers.
Yeah, but due to the benefit of everybody working at Tally, that's the case in 80% of companies.
Yeah,
right.
I
Which
mean,
is positioning. Why positioning is so hard? Like if you don't have it clear internally, then how you expect consumers to have it clear? All right,
100%.
All right, mate. So to start wrapping it up, let's go with the resources. Do you have any resources you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I know that this is a podcast that is related to growth, so I wanted to.
You can share anything, man. Any movie, whatever you feel like it.
But I wanted to share. So I've been following a lot of the content that unusual ventures have put out there, and it's not it's a new VC that is formed here in San Francisco, and they have one of the partners, Andy Jones, who was basically led growth at Facebook, Twitter, Quora, Wealthfront. So
super cool.
It's a really, really smart guy. And the content that they are putting out there, it has like a different approach because it's actually talking about the journey for you as an entrepreneur and the things that you need to be looking out for. And they're more there to like having like their content is more of like a guide. It's not necessarily like tactics or best practices, or it's more of like, this is a piece of content that is going to make you think about, but it's not necessarily something that you need to apply to your organization. So really cool content. Yeah, I've really enjoyed reading their stuff, and for whoever might be interested on crypto and overall finances, I feel that nowadays it's really important to know what's going on in the world. There's going to be like some really, really big changes on the financial models, on how we operate, even our daily life. I think in 5 more years, it's going to be super different from what we have right now.
Yeah.
So I would 100% recommend subscribing to this service called Real Vision. They have a bunch of free content on YouTube where you can start getting a sense of the type of the type of videos that they produce and the content that they're sharing. But it has been like kind of like a wake up call, like kind of like cool. when Neo got that message on the computer, like Neo wake up, like it basically felt like the same way. So
all right.
it's been awesome.
Okay, man.
But it's a rabbit hole. I mean, you're gonna like if you decide to go that way, you're gonna spend like hours.
Are you gonna become a conspiracy theorist and all that kind of stuff? Okay. Let's see.
Maybe.
Let's see. Well, we'll see. That it has we have a warning for it, so no worries. I'm gonna recommend back a book. I haven't recommended a book, I think, in a few episodes. About positioning, actually. I think April Dunford is one of the best people at it around. And it's called Obviously Awesome, How to Nail Product Positioning. So customers get it, buy it, and love it. It's a long title, but it's really good. And for those of you who are lazy readers, our former guest, Patrick Campbell from ProfitWell, in his Protect the Hassle podcast also has an interview with her and a video. If you don't feel like reading, you can get the gist of it there. So that's it, man. That's it for today. It went a bit over long. Hopefully I didn't keep you from any meetings because your day is starting. But really happy to have you. Really happy to have my first Chilean. Hopefully the first of many.
Yeah, there's an amazing community here in the US of Chileans working in growth. So hopefully we can keep developing this. But it was awesome to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope everyone enjoyed the episode.
All right, everybody. Until the next episode. See you soon.
Take care.
Growth Pains.